says that it will create its nation through people from other countries coming to it. So that's not what Germany says. That's not what Kuwait says. That's not what Saudi Arabia says. So the United States also has that cultural dynamic. All of these things are simply to say the KDP looked at that and studied it carefully in all of our work. The next thing I want to point out is we had what was a little controversial, a dual program. And basically, we had to debate each other for many years to get settled on this, but we did finally settle on what we called our dual program. The gist of it was that our reasoning was you could not sustain anti-Marcos, anti-dictatorship support in the Filipino community unless you were an organic part of that community. You had to integrate into that community in all its complexity. And you had to take up the issues of the Filipinos while they were trying to make a new life in America. And if you could do that, then you would be able to sustain anti-Marcos, anti-dictatorship work. Otherwise, you would be floating on the top of the Filipino community, and you would do some demonstrations, but your presence would be superficial. And that's what we call our dual program. And I think the nuance, and it's good you have ex-KDP people here in the Philippines to explain the nuance of this. And to capture it, I would say we held both of those programs firmly. We held the support for the Philippine struggle for democracy and the anti-dictatorship firmly. And we held the relation to the struggles of the Filipino community firmly. But what we did not do is we did not hold them firmly together. Okay, I hope that makes sense. We held each of them firmly, but we did not hold them together firmly. By that, what I mean is, when we were working with Filipino nurses for a licensure issue, the Filipino nurses had to work with West Indian nurses. And so when we took up a licensure issue, we had to take the allies that they had in the U.S., that this was a U.S. issue. It was not a Philippine issue. They had to make new friends. They had to identify their friends, identify their tactics. And so as Filipino nurses, they worked with other immigrant nurses around licensure. We did not combine them together and say, we will work with you on licensure if you take a stand against the Marcos dictatorship. Very crucial in explaining how we got where we were, how Jean and Selmy's case came about. We did not insist in any struggle that you had to agree with us about Marcos, otherwise we wouldn't work with you on your issue. And the same is true in the reverse. In other words, the work we did against the Marcos regime, some people would be indifferent about a struggle for housing in the Filipino community, and we did not say, I'm sorry, you cannot participate in the struggle against Marcos unless you support the housing struggle of Filipinos in this neighborhood. So I think that that's the two things I just want to leave with people in terms of our approach to this. And then link it back to Jean and Selmy. What Cindy alluded to was that we had a struggle at the union. This was a very corrupt union. We built a reform movement. And that reform movement included Filipinos, white workers, Eskimo workers. We were focused on the cannery workers. Although the bulk of them were Filipino, we did not organize that as a Filipino union. As the reform movement developed, we were always advancing the issue of the anti-labor character of the Marcos dictatorship. But I want to stress that that became an issue in the union because as our reform movement grew, that issue was accepted by the union. In other words, if that issue was rejected, we would not have pushed it. In other words, the point is we had to win over the reform movement to the issue of the Philippines. And when the issue of the resolution to send an investigating team to the Philippines, the Local 37, the union, had to go to the international union and do a very complex winning over of the whole international to get that resolution passed. And the fact is we got it passed, but in hindsight, if we had failed, that resolution would have failed. In other words, we did not link our work in the union to the anti-dictatorship. We would struggle for that, but in this case, the international accepted that resolution. And that's the backdrop that brings the two organizing efforts of the KDP together and made us extremely vulnerable to the Marcos attack. So I want to tie it back to what I said in the beginning. Marcos' paranoia about us started right in the beginning by accident. 15 years earlier, we looked far stronger than we were. And then 15 years later, we also look extremely strong, but we are strong. We are much stronger, and we are capable, because of the way we handled those two programs, to bring them together and get a resolution in one of the most important unions in the country. And that's when the Marcos paranoia strikes at us. And so we're really moved that our slain comrades are now etched on the wall of Bantayog. That makes important. That's very important for us and for all the work we did as the KDP in the overseas community. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. And now we will call on Dr. Taka. He will talk of the experience of another hero enshrined in the Wall of Remembrance of Bantayog. Dr. Arturo Taka's experience and the role he played in the anti-dictatorship struggle also in the U.S.
Wow, that's what I look like on camera, huh? I need to lose some weight. Okay, I'm clearly an interloper in this forum. I am not a lawyer. I am not a politician. I'm a pre-diabetic, though. I'm not a comedian either. I think my story is a little different. I'm a psychiatrist by specialty. So my opinions are of no value here, unless you're depressed, anxious, psychotic, or addicted to drugs and alcohol. That's what I do. A little bit about my story, my dad's story. He was a physician also, so just to make it clear, I am not the hero. I have to be dead to be on that wall, and I'm clearly breathing. My father was a physician. I was actually born here in the Philippines, as you can tell by my terrible English accent. And we left when martial law was in '72. And my dad was part of the second or third wave of Filipino immigrants that were mainly professionals. And I grew up there. I essentially grew up there, pretty much Americanized. And when we were able to come back here, we were on political asylum. When we were able to come back here after, I think I was 14 or 15, I had been, it was too much and for my dad even to come back, and so he decided to go back to the States and pursue, continue with his medical practice and work against the corrupt government here that was still, the government was a brand new government, but there's a lot of work to be done. So he was actually assigned to be an attaché to the United Nations under Cory's administration to do projects like the KDP, and I think my story here is from a kind of a close bystander of what these people and organizations did in a different country. Some people have a perception that the exiles, the people who were fighting Marcos from different countries were not really freedom fighters, and they were enjoying life in different countries. They called our group, not my group, my dad's group, the MFP, the Movement of Free Philippines, state guerrillas, because they were eating steak and practicing guerrilla warfare. So that reputation, it was a Marcos moniker, but that was farthest from the truth. You see a lot of harassment by the U.S. governments and Marcos goons, assassinations, and my dad's own medical practice was bombed at one point. So many of the people, the exiles that went to the States, who were able to flee. I was talking to Torita Planas last night at the event, and she was reminding me, boy, when I went there, I had to work as a pizza delivery woman. And she's here, and she was a congressman or a vice mayor of Quezon City, and now she's in a different country, working, delivering pizzas. The story of Congressman Bonnie Diego, which I did not know was involved with uncovering the checks that pointed to Marcos. He was a security guard in the States, and he's an interesting fellow, Bonnie Diego. He with my father helped discover the fake war medals of Marcos, which was housed in St. Louis, Missouri. And that's where we lived. So for years, my dad was trying to gain access to the fake war medals, the Maharlika war medals, and were denied access for years and years and years because of the sensitive relationship between the United States and the Philippines. Well, when things was disintegrating, they suddenly opened them up, and they opened up to an American, a certain McCoy, Professor McCoy, and he got all the glory. So. But my dad was angry, but was also happy that Marcos was on TV one time, and I don't know if it was David Brinkley or Ted Koppel. He was saying, "Mr. Marcos, you torture, your human rights records are terrible." And he said, "No, it's not true. You steal, lie, and cheat. No, that's not true. And also, you're a false war hero." And then he started taking off his microphone and said, "If you continue with this, I'm going to stop this interview." And my dad threw his fist in the air and says, "We got him. We got him." So he knew it was a sensitive issue for him. So he felt vindicated, but also angry that the Americans allowed an American to expose the story. But when I was growing up, I knew there was a lot of people going in and out of the house. Nino Aquino was my parents' Nino in wedding. So he was oftentimes a visitor. He brought him to St. Louis. We visited him in Boston. And people like Raul Lapus, Sonny Alvarez, and Sergio Osmeña. These were veterans of politics in the Philippines who were there in the States with Nino and the MFP. And growing up, I saw these people in and out of the house. My dad having meetings, going up to Nino's house, playing on his piano, and the piano was terribly out of tune. And I told Nino, Tito, your piano's out of tune. And he looked at me. He's a very funny man. He's got a joke for everything. And he goes, "No, son, you're out of tune. You better get tuned up." And I thought, man, what a jerk. musician here. How dare I didn't know who he was. He was in the States for 3 years.